Okay, so we are live. We can just chat a bit until people actually join us. But thank you very much, Fleur, anyway, for agreeing to do this. So it sounded that you're quite keen to share your story. That's always good.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. If I can help other people, then that would just be amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, and for many people listening to these stories, they often say that that's their goal, that they want to be one of those success stories who can talk about it to other people and give hope and inspiration to others. So I think that's really nice when we're doing these and people are thinking, yes, I want to be one of those people.
Definitely. Oh, yeah. I was obsessively watching your success stories once I found out about you, and I thought, right, I'm going to be there. Definitely.
Great.
I wanted that so badly.
So you achieved your goal.
I did achieve my goal, and I got better, which is just amazing. Yeah.
So when did all this start for you then, Fleur? And what we'll do is we'll say, well, hello to the people who have joined us so far, and then there'll be people joining us as we go through. But if you start maybe by talking about your story and then and your experiences, and then people can ask questions as we're going along.
Okay? Sure. So I've always suffered from kind of a bad neck, like all my life, but I've never really sort of delved and found out what was wrong with me. So a year ago, it was over a year ago actually, it was the first lockdown. I think I came down with the virus, so did my daughters, and I suddenly started suffering from major anxiety, which I have to say I've never really suffered from up till then. And then, so we recovered, and we had it quite mildly, and then about a month later I was out walking, and I just went on my daughter's scooter. I mean, nothing. And then the next day I woke up and my back completely seized up. And I was trying to work out what had happened. You know, why was my back so bad? And I thought, okay, there's a lot of stress going on. Obviously, from a holistic background and being a therapist myself, I was like, okay, it's stress. And so then I did everything I could to try to relieve it, in the fact that we were in lockdown, we couldn't go to osteopaths. And I kept thinking it would get better. Boy, was I wrong. I just got worse and worse. Progressively. Yeah, it got so bad that I was one of those stories where you just lie on the ground on my back. And that's what my husband said. He said, lie on your back, Fleur. That's the only thing that helps you. And when could I do that? When the kids were going to sleep, really. So by the end of the day, pretty much.
Right. So, and how many children do you have?
I have 3.
Right.
All differing ages. So 16, 8, and well, she was 1 at the time. Well, no, 2. No, just before 2. So she was, a toddler.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, no chance for any kind of reprieve with homeschooling. So it was relentless. And I didn't really know what to do. So I started doing all the kind of alternative treatments. I wasn't really getting anywhere there. And then I thought I'd best to go down the medical channel, which, as we know, isn't always the best way, because I didn't really find an answer. I went back and forth to my GP, and they just said, you need to take ibuprofen regularly, paracetamol, come back. Then they gave me nerve blockers. I didn't want to take those. So I kind of stayed off that for a while. Meanwhile, seeing an acupuncturist, the osteopath actually made me a lot worse. And the first guy I saw, then I went to see my really good guy, and he was like, okay, we need to calm you right down. And it was all my nerve. It was really, really bad at that point. So I was using, ice, heat, doing everything, stretching. I was going in the hot tub. I was doing everything, Pilates, everything, ticking all those.
And were you able to carry on with your normal life? Well, sort of not quite normally, but do your work, look after your kids and things like that?
Yeah, and homeschool. Right. I mean, it was major homeschool at that time, and not really. And I used to walk, even if it made me worse, because I thought the best thing to do is move. And all I wanted to do, Georgie, was lie in bed. I just wanted to lie in bed and cry, and I couldn't. So in a way, having the children made me kind of soldier on through it.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
In the end, I had an MRI, which came back as, you've got terrible neck problems with degenerative discs, and it's you've got an old person's neck in a fairly young person. So I came out of the sort of the spine guy, it was just doom and gloom. And
and they do say the evidence shows that actually you've got more risk of having surgery, and there's more cost to the NHS if people have scans because of how they're being interpreted, even what they're being told because of the nocebo effect and that fear that then drives.
And the thing is, I went privately, Georgie, but I mean, I was so frightened that, you know, I had something terribly wrong with me. I thought, you know, I had cancer on my back. You know, I had something terrible in my head. You know, you get, when you're in so much pain, you obsessively search for what's wrong, and you don't find any answers. And of course, I found this answer, but for me, there was this nagging feeling in my head that there was something else going on, and I knew what it was, but it was, how do I reach for it in a way? So then, of course, I went back to spine guy, and then I had guided injections, steroid injections. They go through here.
Right.
You're awake, you know. It's really unpleasant. Yeah, and that just made me worse rather than better. So then I went on the nerve blockers, which just made. So
this was all for your neck, not your lower back. This is all
upper back, all
upper back. Okay.
But terrible pain, and in my sternum, my chest, I was having chest pain. It was deep bone pain, which is why I thought something terrible was wrong. It was deep in my bones, so deep muscular and bone pain. You know? And the only way I could describe it was it felt like Fleur in my back, constant pain. Funnily enough, I could sleep, but I think I was so exhausted that by the time my head hit the pillow, it was like, God for that. It went on for a long time, and the nerve blockers sort of helped me for a while. I gave up. I mean, I explored every avenue. I knew that there was something else going on. I couldn't quite, like I say, reach for it. And I was at a loss of what to do. And then I met my neighbour, and she told me that she'd had terrible back problems all her life, but she had lordosis. She had a structural problem, which had caused her pain from the age of 20. And she said, I've seen this amazing woman, you have to go and see her. And I thought, well, people say that, don't they? And they say, oh, we've got this great osteopath. And we think, well, it's not a great osteopath. You know, there are great other people. And he hasn't helped me, because he did actually say to me at one point, it's in your brain, because there's your body, you're moving. Like I could do the Pilates, I was pretty flexible. But this is the best thing, Georgie, with the spine guy. When I went back to him, I said to him, oh, my Pilates teacher said, oh, you know, I really, really, really feel that you need to sort of relax your nervous system, and you need rewiring. So when I said this to him, he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I think that's what made me think, right, I've got to find somebody to help me, because prior to this, I've never, ever been unwell. And now I have chronic pain. So something's got to help.
So did you have an MRI scan?
Yeah.
And what did that show?
It told me that I have 2 degenerative discs in my cervical, which is why they wanted to do the steroid injections. Yeah.
Okay. So just wanted to clarify that again. Sorry, I think you mentioned that before, but I was distracted by a comment I had to delete. Okay. So can I just say as well, if anybody wants to just pop in and say hello, so we know, we can see that there are people there, but if you'd like to send us some comments, then do, and just tell us that you're there, and also just if you've got any questions that you want to ask as you're coming along, as we're going along. So Fleur, before we talk about when you met Pippa, what was your life like before this? I mean, how active were you generally anyway?
Super active. I mean, I was doing yoga. I think I got one of those yoga wheels, which didn't really help me, but at the time I thought, oh, I'll just do some back bends, that's going to help me out, and go crazy with the Pilates. You know, I've got to stretch. Which actually didn't really do me any favors. But yeah, so I think the major thing was I had to stop swimming, because lockdown we couldn't swim. And that for me is my inner journaling. You know, swimming is my meditation. So to take that away from me and then give me kids full time under lockdown, just
really tough. Really tough.
Yeah.
Were you having to work at the same time? Were you?
I couldn't. So I usually do a few different things, but I usually do treatment, so holistic therapies. So obviously that was off the cards. So I was just looking after children and homeschooling. Luckily, my husband was furloughed a few days a week, because there were days where I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. It was pretty much like an endurance test. It was like, how am I going to get to the end of the day? And the kids are still alive. They've been fed and they're okay.
Oh dear, yeah, sort of tough times. So in a way, pandemic was good because you didn't have to work, but then harder still because of all the homeschooling you were doing.
Oh gosh, I'd rather work.
Yeah.
I'd rather work than look after children and homeschool.
But at least you didn't have to try and do both.
Yeah. Oh yes, I don't know how people.
Lights at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't working. I was just in pain looking after children. But it wasn't all bad in terms of. It was lovely. You know, lockdown was beautiful weather. We went on lovely walks. You know, it wasn't terrible. I think it was just the worst time to be in chronic pain.
Yes.
Because usually in everyday life you have your headspace and you have your relaxed moments, and you can take time out, can't you?
And you can connect with other people, and that's important as well, isn't it? So I bet you've been feeling quite isolated with all this.
Yeah, and I felt quite lonely in the pain, to be honest, because no one really wants to hear about it. Once they've heard about it, they don't really want to hear about it again. And I think, and also family members, so funny, you know, very sweet, but they would go, "Oh, your back's still bad," because usually when when your back goes, you're in bed for a few days and then you bounce back. So I think they couldn't quite work out why it was still bad.
No,
and neither could I.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to say hello to Alex and Edith. So, all right, don't brag, Edith, that you're from Melbourne and the weather's probably gorgeous there. Even if it is winter, it's probably warmer than it is. Actually, no, we've had it pretty good here, haven't we?
We have.
So you came across Pippa, and you obviously decided you would. This is Pippa Cossens from Osteopathy for All, and you did decide that you would go and see her.
Oh, sorry, my kitten in the background. She's joined in the show. Yes.
We've just shut the door to make sure my cats don't come in.
Yeah, I stupidly. Anyway, she's just playing around behind me.
Doesn't matter. That's life.
Yeah, exactly. Pippa, she's a magician. That woman. I mean, she changed my life. She really did. Wonderful. And also your work too. So Pippa. So my neighbour had told me about her, and then I bumped into her again, and she said, "Just try her." She said, "I went to see her after 20 years of back pain, and she said she did something to me. I can't tell you what it was, but she clicked something in me, and I haven't been in pain since." So that gave me goosebumps, because I thought, wow, she's obviously really good at her job. I must try her.
And you thought, well, that's going to work for me. Just one click and that's it. I'll be better.
I know, it didn't quite work out for me.
But it gave you hope, which is important.
Hope, yes, because I'd lost all hope. And so once I spoke to Pippa, and she said, I said, "Could you help me? Because I've seen everybody." And she said, I think I can. So I thought, oh, great. She thinks she can. She's a professional. She does, stuff to people that I've heard works, and this lady's husband. So I'm going to go and see her. And once I sort of looked up about her and learned about your company, I then watched your fantastic TED talk. I then started watching all the videos. I got the Dr. Sarno book. I was like, oh, I haven't heard about this. Why haven't I heard about this? I should know about this. But you know what? When you haven't had it happen to you, it's not something I kind of research. So
it's not on your radar, so you won't notice it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I had a bit of a thing about chronic pain, whereas I have a friend who has chronic pain, and I thought, well, there's reasons for it. She's had lots of trauma, she's overweight, she's and all of that, and I thought, I'm not that person. I don't fit into that box, which is a bit short-sighted of me, really, because it can happen to anyone. And so I went to see Pippa, and obviously we had about 10 treatments in total over the space of about 3 months. So it was quite a long recovery, and it was pretty exhausting because I had to deal with a lot of things that happened. And of course, I thought it was a year of pain, but actually Pippa turned around to me and said, "Fleur, you're dealing with 30 years of stuff that's happened to you." And really, the first thing that happened to me was when I was 7, and I nearly died.
Wow. Okay. That's a big enough trauma.
Yeah, major trauma.
Especially for your primal brain, if it perceived that you nearly died.
Nearly died. And also, all my life, I've said, when I've retold the story, I've said I nearly died. And every time I've told the brain, you know, I nearly died, but I never spoke about it, processed it, relived it. It was just like, you didn't die, you were fine, move on with your life, and that's okay. But actually, you know, it was a major accident, and I landed on a stick in the ground that went through my chin and up to the roof of my mouth.
Oh, painful.
So I broke a bone in the palate of my mouth, but I had to have pureed food for like 3 months, and was rushed to hospital. But I think what happened before I saw my mum, she wasn't aware of, which was that I had blood pouring like a head injury into a white sink, and the people that were looking after me never reassured me that I was okay. So in my 7-year-old body and mind, I was like, am I alive or am I dead? And because blood is pouring out of me, and they wouldn't let me see my brother, and nobody said I was going to be all right, because I think they were so shocked at what had happened.
Yes.
It was on an assault course at school, so I went to the surgery. I went to the, you know, the matrons, like I was there just with. And then I went to hospital, but of course my mum didn't know what had happened before, and so that was the first thing that happened to me.
Yeah. Stored away there. Wow. Okay.
Pretty major. So I was quite lucky to survive, really.
Yes, that could have been a lot worse. And you can see now, you know, with you having children, you can just imagine what that would have been like for you as a child. Even if you don't recall it all, you know, just imagining if that happened to one of my children, how would that have felt? And then that can help you really begin to identify how you must have felt.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and my
mum, how did you? Sorry, go on.
No, my mum handled it really well, because I think she didn't know how bad it was. They didn't tell her. We didn't have mobile phones or
no, quite.
She got a voicemail on the landline to say, "Oh, you better come in. Fleur's had an accident," and she didn't rush because she didn't know how bad it was. So when she got there, I think because she was quite shocked, she sort of went, "Oh, she's quite Ali Bonk anyway." She went, "Oh, it's fine. Let's just take you to hospital," and then rushed down to the inner throat, you know, down in Brighton, and operated to check there was no splinters. And it was horrible.
And then you had that trauma of surgery as well, and then only being able to have liquids for pureed foods for a couple of months. So you know, that's big, isn't it?
And a flap. I had a flap that I could move with my horrible. It took a while to heal, but what I couldn't understand was how it hadn't gone through my tongue, which is incredible. So the shock, my tongue must have just gone back.
Yes, yeah. Oh. So how did Pippa help you? What did she recommend you do with this awareness?
Well, what was really interesting after a few sessions with her was she said, "Have you ever been in a car accident?" And I went, "Oh yes, I have." And then when I walked away, I thought I'd been in 4 car accidents, and I hadn't realised how that, you know, that's 4 more traumas, and how it had affected me. And also, you know, when I drive, I always think that someone's going to go into the side of me. So I go, you know, you tense up.
Yes.
So with my neck, with that going on. And so when I went to see her, she said, "Your nervous system is really, it needs rewiring, really." And, you know, and that didn't scare me, because I thought, well, can you do it?
Yeah, you do it.
You do it. Do I have to do anything at home? And so, of course, we went to she does the combined approach, as you know, with the cranial osteopathy, and then the SIRPA with the journaling and the meditation. So I did do some journaling for a few weeks, and then I found it really helpful. But then I had to stop, because I was just like a scratch record, and I felt like I needed to move on and do something else and mix it up a little bit. But I did it for about 3 weeks, and I locked myself in a room and did it properly without, you know, 15 minutes, timed it, and it was really, really helpful. That was. And then I did meditation. I tried to follow it all so that I didn't miss anything out, because I was so desperate to get better.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be taking my medication any longer than I had been taking it. So slowly I started to get better, but I had to go through a lot of, you know, processing, a lot of crying, I had a lot of nightmares. I had lots of reactions in the treatment. It was
Right.
powerful stuff. Yeah, it was mostly crying, but real gut jerk reactions from nowhere. And then what's interesting with what Pippa does is that night you're okay, you feel quite worn out like you do with osteopathy, but it was the next night that I was suddenly, it all came back to me. So I was reliving quite a few things that had happened to me, which was brilliant, because then I felt like I was really processing it. But it was just coming out of my brain, and I've stored it, I suppose, in the unconscious. Yeah.
And presumably Pippa was teaching all the self-soothing stuff and the slow breathing, the ways to just calm yourself down.
Do you know, Georgia, she didn't even do that. I think she knew that I could do that myself. So
Oh yes, because you're a therapist anyway.
Yeah. So I think she did mention to me a few things, and she sent me some really good meditations, but I kept falling asleep. Every time I do a meditation, I fall asleep. And I think, oh, well, that's relaxing, I suppose, having a little cat nap.
Yeah.
You know, it's all chilling me out. And so, so slowly she's kind of was de-stressing me. And I'd had a few years of stress. My son hadn't been well, and I'd been in and out of hospital. I'd had a relationship which was not great, and we'd both suffered, myself and my son. So we're both still processing that trauma. And so, of course, once you've had major trauma, you have those layers, don't you, that just build. And it was almost like she needs to unpeel a layer at a time.
Yes.
I mean, I feel almost a bit like when you do Pass the Parcel and you unpeel a layer, and you know you're going to get to that great present, you know.
Yes. But you're doing it gently rather than, just suddenly digging around.
Rather than cracking my neck and manipulating me, whereas I just needed that gentle soothing. And I couldn't do that myself. I tried reflexology on my feet every night. I was massaging myself. And actually what Pippa said was, maybe you just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because each time you're sending those in the neural pathways, aren't you? You're sending the message to the brain that actually, I have got a bad shoulder.
Yeah, there's something wrong.
I'm going to keep that bad shoulder going. So
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So how are you now?
Brilliant. Although saying that, I'm right at the end, I think, of this is quite interesting. So I've done all the Pippa stuff. I've dealt with all the trauma. I've done it all. Yeah. I'm at the end. I've come off the nerve medication. That was fun. I had insomnia for like 4 nights. And I now developed a polyp at the back of my throat, which has to be removed. So it's like the last thing that's kind of, I feel like it's being sent to test me. Yeah. So that has to be removed. But it almost feels like it's that last bit of trauma that's kind of clinging on and going, it's quite like being here. I've been here a long time now. That's how I see it.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
It feels like it's something to do with that. But apart from that, I'm feeling really well. My back is fine. I mean, it flares up a little bit, but I'd say about 95% to 100% pain free. And I know I kept updating you saying I'm, I don't know, 80%. I'm firstly, I kept on emailing you going, I will be a success story.
Yes, you did.
I won't leave you alone.
I just want to say hello to the other people who've joined us, and hello Carolyn, who's messaged. And if anybody's got any questions they want to ask, excuse me, even if you haven't heard all of Fleur's story, if you've got any questions that you want to ask about her experiences and what she did to help, then do put a question in the comments box. So what have you learned? What have you learned from all this?
I would like to say that I've learned how to manage stress, but I don't think it's kind of a possible thing. I think that I realized that life is full of stress, and that actually it's hard to manage that because you're not in control of it. But I now feel like I've got more of the tools to deal with things that happen. And I feel like I think it was almost impossible to be able to do any of that when I was, I feel like it was, when we went into lockdown, I felt like my body went into lockdown, and that's now coming out of it. I see that it just seized up and went. you know what, too much has happened that I can't deal with it anymore. And it's almost like I went into that fetal position. Just stop attacking me, because I can't cope with it anymore. And so I'm trying not to get so stressed about things. But it's the little things for me that I get stressed about, not the big things. But of course, we all know that that's because I don't want to deal with the bigger things.
Yeah.
But yeah, ways of relaxing, taking time out for yourself, meditating. For me, swimming. I'd swim every day if I could. But it's just those tools, having those tools, and unpacking that rucksack. You know, it was like I was carrying boulders, and each time, that's the thing about those layers. Each time, Pippa, and I have to say, I know she'll say, and you'll say that it was me, but I felt like she just took something out, and
she facilitated.
She unlocked parts.
Yeah. Yes.
Suddenly it was like, oh, I can breathe again. And in fact, the first time I saw her, she said, "When was the last time you breathed, Fleur?" And I literally just cried, and I said, I don't know. And that night, I could breathe again, deep breaths. And when you're that stressed and locked, you stop, you shallow breathe. It's weird to explain. It can't.
It's a fight or flight response. It's the first one, you know. And what's interesting is that if you see animals, when they go into fight or flight, you know, and they race away, they're expending all this energy within their muscles, but they're also producing carbon dioxide, and they're breathing fast, and that's helping them then release that carbon dioxide that's been built up. But what we do when we're in fight or flight and stressed is that we do the, breathing, dysfunctional breathing, which is common, upper, fast, not nice, relaxed breathing, which is predominantly in the Western world, I would say. It's very, very common. And we do the fast breathing, but we're not doing the releasing physically. We're not actually running. We're sitting at our desk, and we're feeling stressed, and we're winding ourselves out with all these worries. And yet what we're not doing is we're not running off and therefore creating carbon dioxide to blow off. So what we're doing is we're changing the pH in our body, blowing off too much carbon dioxide. And what happens then? We get twitchy muscles, we get anxious, we might get a bit of brain fog, a bit of pain or whatever. And that's only natural. And that's why it's so important to learn to breathe. That's one of the first things I do with clients, is actually start looking at their breathing and helping them just calm that breathing down, because it's a direct approach. It's the only way really that we can directly approach the unconscious system. So we can, through breathing, we can calm fight or flight, we can calm down the blood pressure, we can calm down the heart rate. And so therefore that's a wonderful self-soothing.
But very difficult. It's very difficult to do deep breathing when you're in pain. So if my diaphragm was locked, and so to do deep breathing, it hurt me. So I was like, okay, well, forget that, because it hurts. It just hurts. And I actually saw this healer guy who was very painful, but he unlocked my diaphragm, because he said it wasn't moving, and my ribs, they weren't moving. And so to then have that unlocked, it's suddenly like, oh, I can breathe again. And obviously that like you're saying, calms everything down, your blood pressure. Absolutely. Everything. It just
just as dealing with some of that trauma, the trauma that's causing that to lock up, by dealing with that, then you allow that starts to release, and then the breathing becomes easier as well. The other thing is that, stress is not just what's happening to us, our perception of stress. So there's a stressor, which is something that's happening in our lives, these things that happen, divorce, pandemics, things like that. That creates about 10% of our perceived stress. 90% is dealt with in here, is how we are dealing with it. And that then ramps up how we perceive that stress. And that's why you can't say that there's a cause. That's why, for example, in the pandemic, everybody's responded differently, because they've had different experiences in their past. They are different people. They have different ways that they self-sabotage, for example, and create their own stress. So really it's about not just what's happening. And the nice thing about it is, once we recognize that, we know we can do something about it. Yeah, and that then feeds into like the circle of influence. You know, we can get really wound up and stressed about this pandemic and about what other people do, and about government or whatever. And it's fine to be, you know, considering that, but if that's causing a lot of your stress, you are focusing on things that you can't change. Whereas if you focus on things that you can do, like pandemic-wise, going out at a time maybe it's quieter, or when you have, making sure you have your mask on, making sure you keep a distance, then those are things that we know we have control over, and then we feel a bit safer when we're focusing on things that we know we can control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a lot that we can do, even if there is a lot of stress going on. And now, you know, as you know, now you have learned about what you can do to deal with stress. So no, you can't stop all the stress happening. Now, what you are aware of now is the impact it has on your body if you don't deal with it. And therefore, you now have that awareness and understanding and some strategies to know what to do with it.
Well, it is funny you say that, because I remember one time going to see Pippa and saying, okay, so my mum has said to me, after I was telling her all about what's gone on with you, she said, well, you know, but Fleur, you know, you have stress all the time. So why doesn't everybody like you? Why doesn't everybody have a bad back and in chronic pain? And so, of course, I went back to Pippa and I knew the answer she was going to give me, which was, well, you went into overwhelm. You know, you went into the poster that she has of where it's like builds up. And actually, you know, some stresses you can deal with, and it depends on how you are in life and what's going on. But actually, I'd had way too much that had gone on, and it gone like this. I'd gone, oh, I can't cope anymore. Somebody help me. You know, like hollering from the top of a skyscraper. You know, help me. I can't do this anymore.
And so then you are being helped by all these parts of you, these protector parts that are actually just sort of saying, it's okay, we can manage. Let's just make sure that we're coping and we're pushing through things and we're being perfect and conscientious, whatever. We'll soldier on. Yeah. And that's protecting you from actually feeling all those really threatening emotions.
Yes.
So they're protecting you.
Yes.
You actually
and also once you open up that, your triggers are then open. So things start to trigger you, and you think, where did that come from? And of course, it's because you're starting to, you know, you're processing. And of course, you think, like I thought, oh, I had a terrible relationship, and I thought, well, I've dealt with that. But you know, that's the message I convinced myself that I had dealt with it. In actual fact, Georgia hadn't dealt with it. My body hadn't dealt with it. Maybe I had. In my mind, I dealt with it. My body hadn't, and I think that was key with the treatments with Pippa, was to you know, maybe not delve too deep into that Pandora's box, but it was opening up Pandora's box and saying, you know, we're going to actually. And what was lovely was near the end, you know, Pippa said, I think I can almost discharge you because you everything's on the shelves. You're back on the shelves, and you're reorganized. You know, you're rewired.
Yeah, great. And I often think, rather than thinking of Pandora's box, I often think about, you know, a can of worms, you know, and some people do say, well, what if you're just going to tip up this can of worms? And that's why I encourage people to look at it more as, you know, there may be a can of worms there, but what we're doing with this work is actually just dipping in and dealing with one. It might attach to one or two others. So yes, you're dealing with that. The aim is not to just go woof and then suddenly just fall apart with all these worms.
I mean, it can be uncomfortable, and it can push you to a place that is it's brave. I think it's brave to do it, because you have to face some of your fears, and you have to deal with some of your crap, you know, that you didn't want to deal with, and you thought maybe I've dealt with it, but actually you've stored it somewhere, and that's why you've got fibro in your back, or you've got, you know, nerve pain over there, and it's because it's because it's stored itself, hasn't it, as a wound in your body.
And it's also interesting that as individuals we're all different anyway, so we have different ways of maybe avoiding having to deal with things. Excuse me. We all have ways that we self-sabotage. In fact, one of our other practitioners, Gemma McFall, who's in Sri Lanka, she has shared a link to a sabotage questionnaire that we can put in this later on. But this is about how we self-sabotage. And I did my questionnaire a couple of weeks ago, and it was just so to the point and very accurate. And avoider, you just said about avoiding things, avoider, it's one of those things. And I absolutely recognised that at the weekend, because it's actually, I realised that I was feeling something. I was just feeling out of sorts. And I was thinking, okay, I probably would benefit from journaling about this. And I had the evening free. I think it was the Monday evening. I had the evening free, and then I thought, okay, so we'll do it now. And then I realised that I was just sort of sorting the cats out, and then I sort of popped into the office to just do some things. And I knew that it was around about 2 years since my dad died, and I just had a feeling that this was related. But do you know what? The automatic unconscious way that was going on unconsciously was to actually avoid that. So I did the easy bit of just sitting down and doing some emotional awareness. I did some sort of belly breathing. So I did some self-soothing, but I didn't do the more in-depth stuff. And then in the morning, I woke up early. What a surprise. So I woke up early. I got up and went for a walk, and actually, as soon as I could, I then sat down and then I began journaling. And that's when I was able to really deal with it. And then finish the journaling by looking at what have I learned from this? You know, what are the benefits of moving forward and things like that. And there were things, it was things that I realized I hadn't addressed when my father had died, because you can't journal about every single thing. No. And it's not just about journaling, but there were little things that, for example, you know, I have to say that, you know, my mother's upset that we weren't with my father when he died. And I've been trying to explain why, because we didn't know he was going to die that night, and he'd been picked up. But I hadn't realized that I was trying to sort of be there for her without recognizing that actually I feel bad that nobody was with him when he died as well. So that really brought up a lot of emotions around that, and I was able to then explore. And one of the benefits is that, you know, I'll make darn sure that one of us is there for my mother, if at least one of us is there for my mother when that time comes. Yeah. But it's
multi-layered. It's multifaceted.
It's multi-layered, absolutely. Yeah. And things
and you think, oh, it's just this, and it's actually there's a plethora of things, and that's what's the good thing about doing the journaling. And your questionnaire, I have to say, that was really helpful to me when I think I must have done it about the 4th or the 5th treatment. Right. Yeah, Pippa said, why don't you try filling this out? And of course, my handwriting was really messy. But what was interesting about that, Georgie, is I thought of things and had to come back and add. I was like, oh, I had an accident there, I had an accident there. Oh, gosh, I had that trauma, and I had this thing in the hospital, and oh, my goodness, I had that relationship, and then I had a divorce, and then and then the pregnancy, and then the birth, and, you know, and it's just like, whoa. You know, Pippa turned around and went, you survived all of that. Like, absolutely. Well done. You know, and when you put it on paper, you think, I didn't realise quite how much I've been through, because you're always trying to look after others and make sure that everyone else is okay, especially as a mum. And, you know, with a son that was having lots of health problems, in and out with all sorts of things. And you're feeling their pain, and you take on that trauma as well.
Yes, of course you do. Yeah.
Oh gosh, so there was all of that too. To
absolutely.
Add to the bucket.
I just want to say, if anybody's got any questions to ask, then just post your questions. But otherwise, we'll just carry on chatting.
Yeah, we can chat for hours.
Yeah, quite. I think what's interesting is that we do cope. It's our life. We just think this is normal, and so we get on with it without realizing, you know, that they are there, and these are neural pathways that have been sort of set in place there, and they might be dormant. But things, whether if we have a similar feeling or a similar situation, that can trigger us, or maybe cues. You know, I was thinking, the first thing I thought when you said that there'd been a stick incident was that, you know, for some people, even just seeing a stick, especially a stick near their young child, could be a huge trigger for an onset of symptom, or even just fear, a reaction.
Yes, and I'll tell you what happened, and actually Pippa identified this, was when I thought we were ill with COVID, I was so worried about my children because we knew so little about it, and it was terrifying. And she said that the feeling that you might have lost one of your children took you back to the stick accident. And what was really good with the journaling was she asked me to put my to get in touch with my inner child as an adult and talk to the inner child, and I found that so helpful. And there was just so much emotion, and I was on a bit of emotional roller coaster for a couple of days dealing with that. And I actually woke up in the middle of the night tasting blood in my mouth. You know,
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was actually that powerful, the reaction that I had from processing
It's
it.
incredible. Yes.
Vivid
Yeah.
dreams, you know.
Yeah, and I certainly find a number of my clients say when we've started doing some inner child work and talking about self-compassion, that's a game changer for them, because they start to realize, you know, even how they speak to themselves, and that you would never talk to somebody else the way we talk to ourselves. And once you begin to catch on to that and recognize, and starting to, you know, use endearments when you're talking to your inner child, or when you're just self-soothing yourself and just chat, you know, reassuring yourself about something, to actually cause, you know, call yourself sweetheart. I mean, I look at when I'm talking to my cats, I often do say, you know, words like darling, sweetheart, or whatever, which I don't generally use a lot. But I have found myself doing that a lot with my cats. And that's when I'm talking to myself, then I started using that for me as well. So that then is more reassuring, and how we can be so hard on each other, on ourselves.
But the inner child thing, I think prior to having chronic pain, I would have gone, oh, what a load of rubbish.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, it convinced me otherwise. You know, a bit like you know, having back pain for a year. I mean, if I went back 2 years ago and said that we were going to have a pandemic and I was going to have back pain for a year, I would have gone, well, you're nuts. You know, that's just not going to happen. I don't have a bad back. Yeah. And I think also the fear of when you go and have an MRI, and then, you know, you go and see somebody and they say, you know, it's kind of like it's only going to get worse and you're going to have surgery. You go home and you're like, it's the end of the world, and I'm going to be ill forever. And it's that stress, fear, that kind of perpetuating cycle of pain. And I remember thinking to myself, and I put it actually as a reminder, as a note on my phone, my pain is not me. Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? Why am I in pain, and how do I get out of pain? And I'm not going to be like this forever. Yet the problem is when it goes on for so long, you get so stuck that you just don't know how to get out. It's like being in a hole, you know, and no one being able to pull you out of it.
And that's interesting, because it's so important, because so many people say my pain, my anxiety, my depression, as if they're owning it, it's part of them. And that's one of the first things that I will say, is actually recognizing that this is not yours, you know.
But it becomes you. It becomes
and therefore this is a mindset change that needs to happen when you come across this approach. When you begin to recognize there is hope and how can we move forward, then one of the first things is to recognize that you are not your pain, and that this is separate, and even to stop talking about it and focusing on it.
Very difficult, because you just obsess over it, and you don't stop talking about it. I mean, you just become like a scratch record, and it's really difficult.
And that's reinforcing the neural pathways all the time.
Yes.
And that's again why we talk about this right at the beginning. I even get, you know, if many people struggle to not talk about it at all. So what I tend to say is to get people to change the name. So to name your pain.
Yes.
So
Dave.
one lady had it could be Dave.
One of our clients named Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. No.
One of my clients recently just into her head popped the word Marjorie. She didn't know why, but she was trying to find another name, but actually the one that it was supposed to be was Marjorie, so it stuck. But there was a lady who had leg pain, and she changed it to Lovely Pins, used the LP for Lovely Pins. And so in the morning, her husband, instead of saying, how's your leg pain, would say, how are your lovely pins?
Lovely.
That means there's no fear related. It makes you laugh. Another lady had tinnitus, and she changed the name to Tinkerbell, because she said that even just the word tin in tinnitus was like scratching nails down a board. So she just named it Tinkerbell. And I knew she was actually using that and not using the word tinnitus, because throughout the time I worked with her, she didn't say the word tinnitus until the last session. And on the last session, she said, do you know what? I don't feel I'm somebody who has tinnitus anymore.
Brilliant.
And that was brilliant to hear. But that's when if you think about the pain as being something so cute and fluffy, like, you know, Tinkerbell or whatever, how can you be angry or fearful of that?
I love it. It's absolutely brilliant. But I think what's fantastic is, and I think this is what's really important for people holding on that have got chronic pain, is that if you have a day or an hour or even a couple of minutes where you're not in pain, it means that you can not be in pain.
Absolutely.
And I think that was what was difficult for me with it going on for so long and so prolonged, that actually I remember when I had my jab, this was really interesting. I had no pain for 3 days. And I called up Pippa and I was like, I've got no pain. And she said, well, that means that you can be pain-free. And I was like, really? Oh, wow.
How can it be a physical problem if you're pain-free for a few days or even a few minutes?
I know. It's incredible. And then it gets you feeling hopeful, positive, and being able to manage and cope better, knowing that you can, it might go away.
Yeah,
it might
absolutely.
Not be there forever.
Yeah. So Alex is saying, it says the same reason that he's stuck. He's got TMS 24/7, just can't get out of my head. I know that's not helping. Absolutely. And when there's anxiety as well, then that feeds the pain.
It does.
Need to address both of them, definitely. And especially, I think when that is going on, it's so hard to get out of your head and to process things and to be able to get into the body. This is when having one-to-one support can be really helpful from somebody.
He needs someone helping him if he can. Definitely. It's hard to do it on your own. You just need somebody doing a hands-on approach with you, and it's marvelous. The results. It's just like a miracle. Just like I said at the beginning, Pippa was a magician, and I'm sure there's lovely people, more people like her. But she's also very healing as well. I mean, she doesn't realise how incredible she is, and using that her approach is she's just brilliant.
Yeah,
she saved my life, so I'm indebted.
Wonderful.
To her. Yeah.
Right, well, well, no, Pippa's the one that's facilitated all this for you, and I think that's wonderful. And she does have a special way of combining this approach with her work, which is wonderful. So
I did read the Dr. Sano book though, Georgie, and think, oh well, if I read it, apparently once you read it, then you're pain-free the next day. And I was like, waiting, not working on me.
It is a shame because that, for some people that causes them to lose hope because they're not better. And it says that lots of people can get a book recovery and they keep trying to read it again and again. And you know what, even if there is a book recovery, what have they learned? They've not learned a lot. And quite often what happens, they've had that aha moment. And sometimes what can happen is that when they face stress again, they've not learned how to deal with this, apart from maybe a bit of journaling. But many people reading the books recover because they have an aha moment, an epiphany without journaling. And even if they have journaled,
secrets in there.
No. And so when this happens again, then they go back and read the book again. And I've seen lots of people where they just keep reading it and trying to work out sort of what's going on, and they might do a bit of journaling, but then they end up going down the medical route and eventually coming back because they haven't had that epiphany the second time. But that just means there's more learning. It's a personal development journey.
Definitely. And the whole disc herniation thing, I before I read about it, I was like, oh, my neck is stuck. It can't be ruined. I've got to have surgery. And actually, when I read something, I think it was in that book or one of the books I read about it being like wrinkles or grey hair.
Yeah, grey hairs of the spine. Yeah.
Well, exactly. So if everybody has it, doesn't mean you should have pain.
Absolutely.
But so the medical route didn't help me at all. It just made things worse for me. So yeah.
And that is just the lack of awareness and understanding of the mind-body connection, in how emotions affect, how, the fact that there's so much evidence about past trauma being linked with chronic pain and other conditions. I think all medical professionals should know this, and we should ask every single person, even if there was, just one question: was there any time you felt unsupported in your childhood? Or
is there something happening to you at the moment in your life?
Sorry?
Is there something happening to you in your life at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Just basic general questions like that, not sort of being fearful of going and asking the questions, because there are easy ways of asking those sort of questions. What was going on at the time that your pain came on, or leading up, even sort of a year to 2 years leading up to when you had pain, as well as childhood. But when these questions aren't being asked, then what happens is that the fear of God is being put into people by commenting on, and I know they're working on this in the medical world, but the way they are being told the results of scans, and the aim to be to make, you know, patients are reading scan reports. It's not just doctors reading it, and patients are reading it and sort of, oh, there's, you know, there's this compression, prolapse disc, the tear, whatever, and then people focus on that, and that's why studies have shown that there's an increasing cost to medical health, for medical health, when people have scans and tests like that, because they're not
and surgery that they don't need to have, and
they don't
work.
A lot less cost because they don't. The studies show that more people have surgery if they have scans taken. And
also it's very scary being told you've got not just one nerve, compressed nerve, you've got a whole load of them, and what do? You think that you've got to keep still. Well, that's just crazy. And then you go and see different, you know, I went to have a physio, and the guy actually gave me exercises that actually made me worse because I didn't need to do neck exercises, because actually, and Pippa said, it's not a neck problem that you've got. It's just where the weakness is and where you're storing it. And I mean, I knew that deep down, but it's just finding the right person to guide you and help you and put you onto your recovery.
Absolutely.
In the right direction.
And your scans are probably exactly the same now as they were when you had them, and yet you don't have pain.
Oh, yes, exactly. And he said to me, oh, you've had this for a year. So I'm going, what happened a year ago? I developed bulging discs a year ago. What are you sure? Are you sure I've not had it my whole life? I did have a stick accident. He was like, it's got nothing to do with that. And I'm thinking, it must do, because this must do. You know, so
because he's thinking physically, and if you're unaware of it, he's doing the best he knows with the understanding he has, basically. So if he's unaware of the trauma being involved, then how can he even consider that might be involved?
But he didn't even ask the question, Georgie. It was like, oh no, a bit like the question, being uninformed about the nervous system, and you know, what does that? I don't know. I've no idea what that means. He said, you could try something. It begins with M. I went, mindfulness, and he went, oh yes, that's the one.
Oh dear. Oh, that's not good. Oh dear. But it's about education, isn't it? It's about education and awareness, and really helping people recognize, all health professionals in the medical field to actually understand this, to know the basic pain science, the evidence that's out there now, so they can, so that they can ask the right questions and consider things rather than trying to, it's quite often it's like putting 2 and 2 together and making 5, because it doesn't quite fit the symptoms, but the findings are on the scan, so that must be the cause. Yes. Even though there is incredible amount of evidence, and there are more and more people being much more aware of this now, but clearly there are still some who are not, which is so sad.
It is, and you know, taking painkillers or popping pills all the time, it's kind of disguising what's going on, the underlying cause, and it's just treating the symptoms, but it's not really. It isn't helpful, and you get into such a cycle where you look at the clock and you go, it's time for another one. And actually, I don't think that they touch it when you have pain like that. They don't go anywhere near that pain, so you're almost stuck in this vicious cycle of popping pills, and it's not doing anything for you. You know, and just making it worse for your digestive system too. And
some of the tablets make the pain worse as well.
Well, I think that with the nerve blockers, actually, because coming off them helped my pain, because it was like it was still holding on, because it was still, my brain was going, I need to take them because they're helping me. And so it was that whole circle going around of, actually, I need to break it, to break that last kind of bit of pain there. And it worked, but boy, coming off them was horrible.
Yes, no, that can happen. Okay, well, thank you very much for talking about so many interesting things that I'm sure will give a lot of people hope and inspiration. So thank you.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah, and thank you also for Pippa Cossens from Osteopathy for All, so down in Brighton, or near Brighton.
Go see Pippa. My whole family and friends I mean, she's so busy. Just for me.
That often happens. It's lovely. So that's great. And you can find Pippa's details on the Find a Practitioner page.
Oh yeah, before you go, I must tell you that my son, who's 16, suffers from severe anxiety, and I knew that Pippa would be able to help him. She's seen him twice, and his anxiety is really kind of dissipated. And in the last month, and I said to him, just, you know, is there something that happened to you in the last month? And he went, no. And I said, you saw Pippa? And he went, oh, she really helped.
Oh, that's
brilliant.
Lovely. Yeah, that's really good to hear. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and all the best with everybody, and see you next month. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.